Hey, FDS listeners. Are you looking for a new true crime podcast to binge? Introducing Forensic Tales. Hosted by me, Courtney Fretwell, Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast with a forensic science twist. Each episode features real, bone-chilling stories to satisfy your inner forensic science and true crime itch. From fingerprinting to criminal profiling, we've got every investigative angle covered. Forensic Tales covers cases including well-known serial killers to cases you've probably never heard of. Some cases have been solved with forensic science, while others have turned cold. Forensic Tales is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. That's Forensic Tales Podcast, a podcast that reminds us that not all stories have happy endings.
Hey Queens, are you ready to level up? Then join our Patreon at patreon.com/The Female Dating Strategy, where you can find weekly bonus content and FDS commentary on all the latest pop culture, relationship, and dating news. If you just want to listen to the extra bonus content, we have the Lurker Mode tier on our Patreon. If you want merchandise, access to the private FDS Patreon Discord, which also includes a monthly book club with FDS and feminist themed books, as well as FDS merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, and the opportunity to discuss topics with the FDS podcast queens live, as well as submit stories for our Rose to Scrote Queen and Nuances discussions on the podcast itself. So if you'd like access to all this and more, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/The Female Dating Strategy. What's up, Queens? Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm Ro.
I'm Lilith.
And today we have a very popular radical feminist. She rose to prominence on Twitter and wrote a very, quote, controversial book called Why Women Are Blamed for Everything. She's a chartered psychologist and founder of victimfocus.org.uk, an organization that seeks to eradicate victim blaming and move large systems towards more informed and anti-oppressive ways of working with victimized people. Dr. Jessica Taylor.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this for ages.
So have we.
I've been looking forward to this for ages, so I'm so glad that you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do.
You're a highly, highly requested guest.
I find myself always just liking and retweeting you out of habit, right?
I see a Jess Taylor tweet, I retweet or quote tweet.
Automatic.
Oh, that makes me feel so much better. Maybe I can figure out what your handle is and then I'll be like, oh, it's you.
The first time you liked one of my tweets, I was like, oh my gosh, she noticed me.
That's probably because you tweet awesome shit.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, so we know who you are, and a lot of our listeners probably know who you are. But for people who, might be tuning in for the first time, do you want to tell us a bit about your background, who you are, what you do, and, how you got into this whole profession?
Okay. Where do you even start with that? That's massive.
It's a big question, I know. Sorry.
I feel like being like, hi, I'm Jess, I'm 31.
What I was really interested in is how you had a sort of non-traditional start to your academic career. So I was really curious to know more about that and how that started.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right about that. I didn't finish high school because I had way too much going on in my life. I'd been being sexually exploited and trafficked and abused between 11 and 18. So even though I was a straight A student, I just didn't have the brain power really for school. I couldn't be arsed with the bureaucracy and I didn't understand rules for the sake of rules. I was dealing with trying to stay alive. So if I went to school and they were like, your tie's too short, I'd be like, oh, fuck off. I
have bigger problems than this.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, shut up, man, I'm coming down from drugs, fuck off. So I had too much going on. So I got in a lot of trouble at school, mainly just through, I guess, not wanting to get involved in, rules and arguments and things like that. So, I still tried really hard because I really, really loved learning, but I just didn't fit in. I was too much of a problem for them. So I also basically was convinced to run away from home and go and move in with this adult guy when I was 15 years old. So I actually left school and left the area I was living in and went and lived with this man. And it meant that, I didn't finish high school. So that means that I couldn't get into a university in a traditional way or anything like that. I got pregnant when I was 16, and then I was beaten up and I had a miscarriage, and then I got pregnant again almost straight away. And then I had a baby when I was 17, just 17. And, you get thrust into that. And I was just sort of like 17 years old with a baby, like, shit, like, what do I do now? And I pretty much, I guess, decided that I had to like fend for myself and figure out how to like protect this little baby and what was I going to do. I talk about this a lot with my partner, but abortion just like wasn't even suggested to me. It like wasn't an option. Nobody was like, do you think maybe you want a termination? Like, I never had that conversation with anybody. I can honestly say it never crossed my mind once. And that's not because I was like some maternal, I don't know, like Madonna type. It was just that I don't know, like, I never even considered that was an option. So I, had a baby and I was like, right, what do I do now? And I started like working part-time and trying to like protect myself and stuff. And then by the time the baby was 5 months old, I ran away from abuse and I ran away from the perpetrators, and about 50 miles away, didn't tell anybody where I went, and like tried to sort of protect myself and start again. And then I met another guy who was abusive, but like, I guess because he wasn't like literally beating the fuck out of me every day or like raping me or whatever, I thought it was like better and that it was like loads safer. And so I thought I was okay. And then I got pregnant again really quick, again, not planned. And then all of a sudden I was like 19 with 2 kids. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't know what I'm going to do. And I had a stroke whilst I was pregnant with the second one when I was 19. And which is why I wear glasses. And then I had a stroke, and then I went into premature labor at 29 weeks pregnant. And then I was in hospital for 5 weeks with like myself and the second baby. And then like I got home and I had this like tiny little premature baby, and I had like a 2-year-old. I was like, what have I done? And I remember just being in the middle of the night and trying to feed this tiny little premature baby and thinking, oh my God, like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, you've now got to support 2 children. What are you going to do? That's basically where my career started. I was like sat in the middle of the night thinking, right, what are you going to do now? And I thought, well, maybe I could start by volunteering somewhere, or maybe I could like build a career somehow. I had no idea how I was going to do any of that. I can't remember, maybe it was around that time that I was out of the wheelchair by then, because I was in a wheelchair for a little bit after the stroke, and then I was on crutches for like 6 months, which was obviously difficult with like two tiny children. It must have been just after that, maybe, because I don't remember going to the interviews on crutches, so I must have been better by then. So I remember going to this interview and them saying, well, you can volunteer, but like we don't really have any opportunities. And they said, we'll ring you if we're interested. And then about a week later, I got a phone call saying, look, there's this role working in a court with women who've been subjected to domestic violence. And like, I don't know if you want to do that. And I was like, yeah, I could probably do that. I was like, just want to help, really. And I remember naively at 19 thinking, oh, I'll be great at that because of everything I've lived through, like I'll know everything there is to know about that. And which is wrong. Like I learned very quickly that was bollocks, and that just because you've lived through something doesn't make you the expert on it. And that just because you know your experience as a woman doesn't mean that you know every woman's experience. But that's definitely what I thought at 19 years old. So I went and did that. And then around that time, there were adverts on the TV saying that, you could go to the Open University if like no other unis had let you in because like you've got no qualifications, or you're older and you've not had that traditional route. And I remember thinking like, maybe I could do that. So I went on the internet and had a look at the website, and I sort of like submitted an application saying that I wanted to do a degree in psychology. And I decided around that time that maybe I wanted to be a psychologist, and maybe I would see whether I was good enough. And I remember being so nervous when I submitted the application, thinking, oh my God, they're just going to like email me back being like, no, fuck off.
Like,
yeah,
you got it.
we were only joking on the TV advert. It's not you, love. It was, I got an email back saying that I'd been accepted, which now on reflection makes a lot of sense considering they accept everybody. So yeah, I went and did a degree with the Open University, which is still an accredited degree and everything, like, but you do it part-time and you do it, around kids and work and stuff. And the degree really gave me the confidence that I was actually intelligent enough to do that. And I remembered sort of like how much skill I had still. And I thought, I found this really easy. And then from that, I was volunteering in the courts on a Friday, supporting women who'd been subjected to domestic violence. I was building my experience. I was going on lots of training courses and figuring out, what I was good at and what I wasn't. So it took me nearly 5 years to get my degree part-time, which I thought wasn't too bad considering I was working and I had the kids. And within that 5 years, I was promoted several times and sort of went into more and more senior positions.
Nice.
Yeah, in the criminal justice system and stuff, which went down like a lead fucking balloon because I was 21 and I was an area manager in the criminal justice system, so which didn't go down very well. I had staff members that I was managing that were like 2 or 3 times my age and they hated me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really difficult to deal with. Like one time I remember they just came into my office and they put all of my paperwork through a shredder for a laugh and then sprinkled it all over my desk as like a way of trying to get me to resign.
What?
Excuse me?
Yeah, pardon me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I remember.
I guess the upside of our very fire-happy culture in America is that would definitely get you fired in most offices here in the U.S. Yeah, the one upside.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, damn. First of all, when I read your story for the first time, hearing how rapidly promoted you got, I was like, queen, nice.
I don't really know how that happened other than the fact that I have a life policy, which is throw yourself in the deep end and see if you can swim afterwards. And I've sort of done that ever since I was a teenager, basically, and which is that whenever I saw a promotion going, I used to think, I'll apply for that, even if I wasn't good enough for it. Basically, I think like a mediocre man, which is, just have a go.
Yeah, no, that's the key to success.
It is. So I used to just be like, have a go, see if it works. And if it does, it does. So that's what I used to do. So these promotions kept coming up and I used to think, well, I'll have a go because, why not? And then I kept getting them. Yeah, by the time I was like 23 or 24, I was in senior management in the vulnerable intimidated witness programs in the criminal justice system. So I specialized in homicide, trafficking, sexual and domestic violence. And the majority of all of those victims are women and girls. So basically I worked with women and girls all day, every day. And then I went and worked in a rape center, took over management of a rape center where I had like 30 or 40 therapists. We provided counselling and focus groups and support groups for women and girls who've been raped and abused. And I was probably about like 24 or 25 then. And then I, again, decided to just like cheekily apply for a PhD with no master's degree because I thought I can talk my way into that because I can talk my way into anything, frankly. So I thought I'll have a go and see whether that works. I applied to like a top university thinking, what are the chances really, but I'll have a go. So I applied to a top university for a PhD in forensic psychology when I must have been 24 because I started when I was 25 and I managed to convince them to take me on with no master's degree. So I went from bachelor's to PhD and I argued that because of my work experience, I shouldn't be expected to do a master's. So I managed to get on and then I did the PhD really quite quickly because, again, still bringing up the kids. So technically I did the PhD part-time, but I kind of like did it as fast and as effectively as I could. So it was I think like a full-time PhD takes like 3 and a bit years, but a part-time one can take 6 to 10 years. And I did it in 3 years and 3 months to try and get it out of the way. So that would have taken me to like 28 or something like that. And that's when I got my PhD and became a chartered psychologist. And and then like during the PhD, I basically quit my jobs because I went into senior management in human trafficking and sexual exploitation of women and girls. And I quit my job and decided to set up Victim Focus when I was 27. And that was because I noticed how oppressive and misogynistic and victim blaming those systems and those services were that I was working in. And I thought there's got to be a better fucking way of doing this. And so I thought maybe I could have a go again. Maybe I could have a go and make it better. And yeah, we've just grown from there really. So we're a team of 17 women at the moment and we're just gone out to recruitment. I'm recruiting another 10 next month.
That's amazing.
And then the whole thing with the books is just another level of just a wild ride of life, basically.
Oh, yeah, because Ro wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because I read a tweet thread you did a while ago where you were talking about how your haters basically were your motivators and the people that put you on the map as far as a radical feminist author, which I thought was very similar to female dating strategies, right? So I thought you could talk a little bit to that.
About how your haters made you famous, basically.
Yeah, to be honest with you, right, I would take great pleasure in sitting here and shouting them all out and saying thank you, because they crack me up. I actually find it really, really funny that they must watch me through gritted teeth. I find that dead funny. It proper tickles me every day. It's just fucking really funny. But there's been several attempts to properly destroy me that have backfired on every single person that's done them so far. And it's generally like men's rights activists or anti-feminist sort of organisations. Sometimes like alt-right groups have done it. I've had academics do it, just academics that have like shut her up, she's too mouthy. I've had that sort of thing as well. But I've had a couple times where it was fairly minor that meant that I think I was resilient enough. I hate that word actually, but I guess I endured, because I don't like resilience, I prefer endurance. Like I was able to endure what happened around the book, which is how the book blew up, was that, you know, I wrote Why Women Are Blamed for Everything thinking I was going to sell fucking 50 copies or something. And, you know, I would have been dead proud of that. Honestly, I would. And I only ordered fucking 50 or something anyway. Self-published it and like got a printer to print some out for me. And I was dead proud of it. And
it's a good book. I've read it. I liked it a lot. Yeah, I'm glad it blew up.
Thank you. It's actually a bit of a like, I saw somebody online trashing it, being like, this is like a PhD thesis hybrid book. And I was like, yeah, no shit.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. It literally says that.
It's like, oh, well done. Very observant. So, yeah, it was... what happened, it was the press had ran a story basically that I'd self-published this book, and I somehow, my picture and all my contact details got shared on some like forum of like MRA's alt-right group. I don't know exactly where it went, but I just woke up one day to thousands and thousands of messages and comments and emails and just comments on every picture of me on my social media, on my Facebook, on my Twitter, on my Instagram. Every single platform was getting raided, and it was just overwhelming. I'd never had any. I have had one like instance of it being that bad, but not as intense as that. So it was like probably, I think it was like 10,000, just under 10 or just over 10,000 rape and death threats and like really, really like abusive comments in about the space of 5 days.
Over a book.
Yeah. And do you know the best bit about that? It wasn't even over the book. It was over a picture of me holding the book. And that's all it was. That's all that had caused it. So it was really, really bad. Like some of it was really, really bad. It was so violent. Some of the death threats and the rape threats I got was so graphic. And then my computer got hacked. So on the 5th day, my IT all got hacked and some dude took over my computer to like intimidate me and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty scary. The police took all my IT and was like investigating it for ages. But anyway, so like what had happened was then I had tweeted about what was happening, and then the mainstream press picked up and it was like, you know, author of new feminist book gets like 10,000 rape and death threats in a week or whatever. And then because of that and because it went massive, the book that I had self-published sold 10,000 copies in 6 weeks.
Queen. Nice.
Which is like, I didn't realize that was a lot because I thought that people sold millions of books. That's not, by the way, that's not true. Like I thought that that's what happened when people were successful authors. I thought they sold like millions of copies, but they don't. And so 10,000 is actually like very, very high for books, especially for non-fiction book sales.
Especially for your first book, yeah.
Yeah, and especially considering that they all got fucking delivered to my living room.
Really? Seriously?
Yeah, because I hadn't thought it through.
Didn't have a warehouse or anything, yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't have, yeah, exactly. I didn't have any facilities. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have a distributor. So I ordered the books to try and keep up with the orders that were coming through my website, and I just didn't think it through. I did not mentally sort of picture what 10,000 books looks like, but it's a lot. It's a lot of books.
Yeah.
So they turned up on the driveway, and this man in this huge lorry pulled up on my street And he said to me, is this the right address? And I was like, yeah. And he said, I usually deliver these to warehouses. And I was like, oh. And then he said, you realise they're on crates? And I was like, no. And then he got a little like forklift truck out and started like getting them off the lorry and just putting them on my drive. And I was like, oh shit. And I've got pictures of this. I'll send you some pictures of me standing on the drive with crates and crates like higher than me of books.
What did I get myself into? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, shit. And then me and Jamie and her mom then had to take them all into the house box by box by box. And it was like raining and we were like, shit, get them in. Like rain was coming down. So we had to take them in the house. And then once we'd filled up the whole dining room, the whole living room and the hallway and the stairs, then we just stood in the house looking at them like, oh my God, now we have to pack them and ship them. Because we had no help. So, and it was lockdown. We were in lockdown when this happened. It was April 2020.
So this is recent. This was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then, so we were like trying to ship all these books, right? Also, I had made a very stupid decision of telling everybody that if they ordered the book, I'd sign them.
Oh, no.
So I had to sign 10,000 books. And
I'm glad you follow through on your promises.
Yeah, I absolutely do. But also I did get to the point where I was like delirious filling them out. So I can honestly say that if anybody out there has got a first edition of those first 10,000 that I signed, loads of them have got rude messages in and jokes because I got bored. So I started, instead of signing them, I started writing funny shit in them instead.
That's a collector's item at that point, really.
One day it might be. Can you imagine?
Putting it in a museum or something, yeah.
But yeah, so then like loads of celebrities started reading the book, right? Probably because they'd seen it in the press. And I started getting like phone calls and like emails, DMs on Twitter from like really, really famous people. I was like, I thought I was being trolled at first. And then I realized it was real over a period of days. And I spoke to some incredible people that like, I literally was like, just like my jaw open the whole time. And it just like continued to get big. And then like J.K. Rowling contacted me and offered me some help, and she was like, you're obviously overwhelmed and you've sold 10,000 books. And she was like, where is your agent? I was like, I don't have a fucking agent. I don't know what an agent is. And she was like, well, what about your publicist? I was like, well, I don't know what a publicist is, Joe. And then she was like, well, who's distributing all your books? I was like, me, my wife and her mum. And she was like, you are joking. I was like, nope, not joking. So she said, like, let me like hook you up with some people and that'll help you. So that's how I got an agent. So me and Joe have the same agent.
That is amazing. That, first of all, I'm a J.K. Rowling super fan. Secondly, I don't know how, I'm sorry, I'm like still processing that information. Just, that's amazing.
Yeah, she like descended down from the heavens like a fairy godmother.
Let me welcome you into the wonderful world of publishing.
Yeah, pretty much is what happened. It was like it was a pretty big shock. Like I can't describe it any other way. I was just in shock like the whole time. But she was like, let me set you up with my agent and you can have a chat with them. And if you like each other, maybe you could work together. And I was like, thank you. And then I met my agent and they were like awesome. And, they're still awesome. And I've been with them for 2 years and they helped me sign a multi-book deal with a great publisher. And I love my publisher too. And they like totally don't control what I write at all. They're like, their policy is, Jess, if you can evidence it, you back it up and you can argue it well, write what you fucking like. And I'm like, yes, leave me to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that.
So they basically republished Why Women Are Blamed for Everything and took over all my distribution and stuff, so I didn't have to do it. And then I wrote Sexy But Psycho, which is the one that's due out next week. And
which I also love. I've read the first 4 chapters.
Thanks for the sneak peek, by the way.
And I'm riveted. I'm hanging off your every word. I wanted to finish it before we interviewed you, but I'm on chapter 5 right now. And so, yeah, let's talk about that too, because wow, both of your books are just complete paradigm shifts for me.
That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm glad.
I'm still processing the whole comparison, how what we call mental illness now is basically the same traits that we used to call witches, right?
Yep.
And how, women who were, too mouthy or too knowledgeable or too this or too that or too powerful, they'd call them witches. and then burn them alive. And then now they're like, oh, well, you probably have borderline personality disorder. And then they get sectioned. By the way, what does being sectioned mean? What is that?
I guess it's like a term that's used in the UK that means that you're detained under a section of mental health law. So that the phrase becomes sectioned. So it means to be detained in like a psychiatric facility.
Jesus, yeah. I don't even know where to begin with that, because it's just so wild to me that even just the fact that like a woman being lesbian or bisexual is considered a trait associated with BPD, or like, oh, you have an unstable identity and so on. And that was something happening as recently as 2019. Sorry, bro, go ahead.
I want to talk about our first book and then maybe transition to the second book, since we were just talking about the frenzy about her trying to like distribute it. So the first book, you really start to outline how society creates these like multi-layer systems in which blame women for their own victimization. So could you give us like an overview of the book and then talk about how that's integral with your work with victim focus?
Yeah, sure. So Why Women Are Blamed for Everything was like my space to kind of demonstrate that all victim blaming of women and girls is deliberate, it's multi-layered, and that it is supported, colluded with, and encouraged at every level of society. So that, you know, sometimes you hear people saying things like, oh, victim blaming, it's the media's fault. And like, yeah, it is, but it's not just the media, because law enforcement support it, and so does education, and so does health, and so does the family network, and so does religion, and so does culture and tradition. It's sort of like if you cut one head off, another one grows back. You've got like, you can't just solve victim blaming of women and girls by being like, oh, it's the headline's fault, because it just isn't. It doesn't work like that. But when I was studying, it very much is written like that. So the psychological literature is written like, oh, this is the reason for victim blaming and this is how we solve it. But like every time I read more and more and more and more, I just thought, no, it's not one reason, it's several, because misogyny is like omnipresent. Like it's everywhere, you know, so it seeps into every single system. Equally as like present is the defense of men and defense of male perpetrators and male violence. So when you put those things together, you get this like constant culture of victim blaming that exists in every country in the world. You know, there's victim blaming language in every language spoken in the world. So like the book was my space to sort of lay that out and say, you know, women are blamed for everything. And the reason for the title was that at one point in my studies, I found so much evidence that you could take anything about that woman and use it to blame her. Like if she's too pretty, that's her fault. If she's not pretty enough, that's her fault. If she's thin, it's her fault. If she's seen as overweight, that's her fault. Like, you know, for being subjected to male violence, like there's just nothing really that protects you from victim blaming at all. And then the impact on your own well-being and your understanding of yourself is that as a woman or girl, we are very likely by the time we're like even 11 or 12 years old to blame ourselves when we're subjected to abuse, oppression and violence, because, you know, we're in a society that teaches us that that's the case. So the book is like chapter by chapter, like different topics and different ways that victim blaming of women and girls happens, with all the evidence that I've collected over the years and like my PhD and things that I learned from working in sexual exploitation and human trafficking, things that I learned from working in the criminal justice system, the interviews that I did with women who were blamed for sexual violence, and then the interviews that I did with the professionals that work with women in women's services. I think I'll always be proud of that book. Sometimes I think I would like to rewrite it so that it's less structured like my thesis was, but I'm still like super proud of it. And I know that it's now like required reading on loads of degrees and masters and doctoral programs. I know that students use it in their essays and their exams, and the psychologists use it, social workers use it, police officers use it, and it's become like a real source of information and facts. So yeah, for me, it meant that I could also present some of my ideas around integrated models of victim blaming, my like hierarchy model of like, you know, because I believe that there's a hierarchy of victims, like of women, that you have to hit a certain standard to like even be taken seriously by society or the police or whatever. And the thing is, that standard is so fucking high that like nobody hits it.
Oh, and it shapeshifts. That was something that we kind of accidentally discovered with FDS as well, is that we just you end up in such a small, tiny little corner and a small range of existence that you're allowed to have and not be victim blamed, that you just sort of realize, oh, well, none of this matters, so I can just do whatever I want. It almost like, I feel like FDS just kind of came out on the other side, where we realize like, oh, if we're always going to be blamed for violence that happens on dates, if a guy like leaves you after you're married, if you become a single mother, then you might as well take all of that knowledge.
Just ask for whatever you want. Yeah.
Ask for whatever you want, and then start making demands commensurate with the things that they say are the problem that's causing you to be victimized, right? Because if men say things like, well, you should have thought about how much the father your child made before you had a kid with him, and that's why you're a broke single mother, then it's like, okay, well, then you guys got to pay for dates, or you have to do this, or like, we're going to look at your finances before we go on a date, or something like that. And they hate that. But I'm like, well, if we're going to be blamed for it, then why wouldn't you put some kind of system in place to make sure that you're not going to be a victim, since it's going to be our fault when it happens? But they have like the shocked Pikachu face.
Or they blame women, like if they're abused, they're like, oh, it's because you chose the wrong man. You chose a guy who's like a Chad or an alpha or whatever. And then we go, okay, so we're going to establish a rigorous vetting process, and we're going to ruthlessly eliminate men who don't meet our standards. We're going to raise our standards way the fuck higher, and not put up with any shit and walk away at the first sign of disrespect.
And they're like, no, not like that, you know?
And they're like, no, not like that. They get so mad that when women realize that the game is rigged against us and that we start playing the game differently. And, that it's like you can't win as a woman, right? If you have high standards, oh, your standards are too high and too unrealistic. If you don't have high enough standards, something bad happens to you, oh, well, it's your fault for having standards that aren't high enough, right?
Then it's your own fault. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so we figured out that double consciousness and just started making strategies that we thought would make sense.
Be maximally beneficial to women, yeah.
Right, maximally beneficial, which has inspired just mountains of focused hatred from pretty much everybody male.
Yep. I absolutely love that.
Except for our Patreon subbies who are male who love us. Shout out to you guys.
We do have like a tiny male following that don't hate us and actually are pretty hardcore FDS stands, so I do appreciate those ones.
Hey Queens, do you want a gadget-free activity that not only helps you rest, but trains your brain as well? Then you need a Unidragon puzzle. Unidragon puzzles are wooden puzzles that are gorgeously painted. The pieces are unique and challenging, and the finished product is so pretty it can double as wall decor. You can also do this puzzle with friends and family. It's a great collaborative activity.
In addition to the variety of puzzles, a Unidragon puzzle also comes with other fantastic benefits. As queens, our beauty sleep is extremely important, and one of the best ways to ensure that we get a good night's sleep is to keep our phone and computer screens away from our bed. This is where the puzzle comes in. A Unidragon puzzle is a perfect alternative to gadgets, as they can help you to relax and unwind so you can get your beauty sleep.
All while learning analytical skills that you can use in your daily life. So check out Unidragon puzzles and get 10% off with discount code FDS. That's unidragon.com with discount code FDS for 10% off.
Happy puzzling, queens.
This message was brought to you by this episode's sponsor, unidragon.com. Back to the show.
FDS, we started out as a tiny little subreddit, and, we went viral for, it was quite similar to your case, actually, how we had like one post that, people rage shared on the manosphere, and then we started picking up media attention, and then that sort of just like snowballed into this whole thing, and now we have a podcast. So yeah.
It's awesome. I absolutely love that. It's so funny. I love that. I love that they get like so angry and then you end up doing better and then they get angrier. It's just great.
I'm like just cackling on my throne, just on my dark throne.
We end every episode with the phrase "die mad" because we kind of mean it.
Yeah, they're just gonna have to die mad. Yeah, die mad about it.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like how I get, because there's so many, like I said, there's so many people that have really put a lot of time and effort into trying to discredit me, trying to destroy me, like hit me where it hurts. Like they've really tried everything. Like at this point, I can't think of anything. I can't really think of anything that hasn't been thrown at me from every angle. And like when they come up with something new, I'm like, fuck, that's inventive. Because I didn't think there was anything left.
I wish there was something new. I'm so tired of reading the same femcel and cat lady comments over and over and over again. I'm like, guys, please come up with something original.
Some of mine have got really, really inventive. Like I saw one the other day that said that, so like it's moved on now. Like all of that stuff is pretty, like I do get that stuff, but some of the stuff's really inventive. Like the other day I saw one saying that, I lie about like everything that happened to me in childhood and like growing up in poverty and having nothing, and that my dad is actually like a powerful lord. And like, yeah, like
DNA tests, sir.
I know, yeah. I was like, what? And I said to my wife earlier, I was like, if my dad was a powerful lord, he'd be dead because he's an alcoholic and he would have drank himself to death by now. So there was that one. And then I saw one the other day saying that I was, what's it called? A Scientologist.
What?
I know. I don't even like, I don't know anything about it.
My favorite ones are the ones that are like factually incorrect though. Like I've seen some tweets that are like, oh, Dr. Jess Taylor is just like a bitter, childless femcel. You know, she's just mad because she's single. I'm like, you do realize she's like married with children, right? And has like a whole adorable family of pets and stuff. And her life seems pretty great. Like a lot of these guys, when they say, oh, you're just a bitter femcel, those guys are almost always bitter incels themselves. And they're just projecting their own shit.
Yeah.
They don't even know what we look like, but they attack our looks, right? I don't know. They're just so misogynistic and they think that a woman's value is only in her looks. And so they'll just attack that even if they have no idea what she looks like. It's such bullshit.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, like, I mean, obviously people know what I look like, but I don't get bored of like the whole, I don't know, I'll put something up, like a really considered argument about, I don't know, some issue in society. And then a man will be like, yeah, well, no one wants to fuck you. And I'll be like,
tell that to my wife.
But like, I'm just like thinking, is that what you think hurts? Like, so do you think that my whole life revolves around wanting men on the internet to read my tweet about, I don't know, a theory of victim blaming and think, God, I hope this makes men want to shag me? Like, what on earth do they think I'm doing?
Men use that because that's how they judge themselves by. So they think it hurts women because it hurts them.
Yeah, that's important to them. So the fact that they can't get laid, they think, oh, well, I feel like a fucking loser because no woman wants to touch me. So they go around accusing women of that.
So they assume you value that and that's your problem too.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't think that they understand that I would be a lot more hurt if they contacted me and was like, I've read your book and on page 192, there's a typo.
Yeah.
I would be fucking distraught.
Yeah, there's actually some things that if our critics attacked me for that I know that would actually destroy me, but so far I've never heard a single one of them actually say, I'm going to keep that to myself. But like, there are certain things that people could criticize me for that would destroy me, but I've yet to hear them. And so that's why I kind of chuckle to myself. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, because you know what's weird? So there's a certain segment on Twitter that of RadFem Twitter that says that FDS engages in victim blaming because we teach women about like spotting red flags. They think the entire premise of like vetting men is inherently victim blaming. And so like, of course we would never like, if a woman was abused, we'd never be like, oh, she should have vetted him better. We would never say something like that. It's more of like a proactive, like preventative kind of, but I wanted to know, what are your thoughts? Like, I want to know from the expert herself, like, is it victim blaming to learn about how to spot red flags?
Okay, so my view on that is similar to the way that you've described it. So I have some caveats. So the first is, if this is a conversation between two equal women, just talking about the signs in men that make them feel uncomfortable and how to like respond to them or spot them or whatever, then I don't feel that that's victim blaming. But if that was a person in power, if that was law enforcement, or if that was, you know, a teacher or a social worker being like, you need to spot these red flags, why don't you keep spotting them? You know, you're putting yourself at risk by not spotting them and escaping these perps, then yeah, I have a fucking problem with it. So like, and then the other thing about that is what you just said, is that I think it goes into victim blaming at the moment when someone goes, well, why didn't you notice the red flags? Like, that for me is a problem. Like, so I talk about it myself. Like, I put a tweet up the other day being like, you know, I know what it was. I said, like, if you are with a man who tells you that all of his exes are psycho and all of his exes are liars and jealous and don't listen to anything my exes say because they're all fucking jealous and you know, they just want to split us up, I was like, red fucking flag. Like, that is a big problem, you know. So I'm not saying you know, and then if you're with a dude like that, it's your own fault, because that's a huge leap. I'm just pointing out the red flag in him. If, however, I was putting a message up being like, you know, and if you don't spot this and you choose to stay with him, then you're the problem, then yeah, I think that's victim blaming.
So I wanted to follow up with that, because sometimes we do call women pick-mes for perpetuating what we think are systems of patriarchy and more or less knowingly doing it. When do you think someone crosses over from victim to victimizer, even if they're female? Because there are women who, they're, I want to call them handmaidens, but I remember there was this whole plate shaming controversy on Twitter about women being like, if you don't fix your man a plate during Thanksgiving or Christmas, then he has a right to divorce you.
Another woman will.
Exactly. Like there's stuff like that where you're like, I don't want to blame them for the messages that they received as a kid that make them believe this kind of stuff, but they also voluntarily got on Twitter and decided to shame other women for not doing something what we'd call pick-me, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So how do you reconcile those two ideas?
See, we maybe we differ on this slightly, but I genuinely see those as like even bigger victims of the patriarchy than women that can spot it. I just think that when you're that deep into it and you are so deep into it and you're so sure that you like literally being a servant to men makes you righteous in some way to the point where you push it on other women and then try and shame them, all that does to me is shout like how like controlled and groomed you are,
how indoctrinated they are.
Yeah, like that worries me. Like women like that scare me, but like they scare me because you just know they're being treated like shit every day, but they've been groomed to enjoy it. They've been groomed to like think that's normal. Whenever I see comments, like, because I see that all the time on my social media, and I know that like some of my followers will comment back, be like, oh, you fucking handmaiden, or you pick me, or whatever. And I always think, I know that comment is inflammatory and I know that comment is shaming other women, but I think that's a real woman in a real relationship with a real man who has pushed her down so much that she's now on Facebook, like, taking chunks out of some other woman for like the things that you just said, like not cooking well enough or, something really domesticated. There's that. And then there's a real level of internalized misogyny, to the point where I don't think it's possible to argue that women are constantly impacted by levels of misogyny in society. So I think it's normal that women are misogynistic towards other women. And I think that's slightly different because I think that women can choose to victimize other women. I think women, I've said this before. I made a video about it recently that I was going to put out because it makes some radical feminists really uncomfortable. But I am sick to death of defending violent and abusive women by saying things like, oh, she was vulnerable, a man made her do it. It's not her fault. She was a victim too, and all that shit. Like, at the end of the day, I think it's misogynistic to not accept that women do have the capability and the power to be dangerous offenders, violent offenders, right?
Right. No, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So I'm glad that someone else agrees, right? Because the thing is about this is that I think we should be more interested in the fact that women have the power, the capability, the intelligence, the strength and the violence in them, right, to go out and fucking kill people, sexually assault people, kill kids, whatever it is that men are out there doing all the fucking time, right? But they don't do it. The interest should be in why they don't do it, because they've got the fucking power to do it. They've got the capability to do it. So there's a choice being made there, or they're socially groomed and controlled not to utilize those parts of themselves. So I have no interest in trying to minimize, like, for example, when a woman goes out and murders two people, or when a woman has killed her own kids, or a woman shoots her husband, or whatever it is, I have no interest in defending that woman. Like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, it's not her fault. She was abused as a child. We don't accept that shit for men. Don't accept it for women. Like, let women, be accountable.
Women can be shitty people too. Okay, like
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's tough because I think part of the reason why we've been controversial even with feminist groups too is because we also acknowledge like the wound that comes with the fact if your mother is violent or is like a massive pick-me and puts like her husband or her boyfriend above you, like that causes personal wounds, and we sort of let women validate the fact that like, yes, you do have a right to be angry for not being protected by a mother figure who should have protected you, right? But it can come across, I think, as well as victim blaming, because sometimes they're like, well, maybe she couldn't have left, but then there's other times they're like, no, she could have, and she chose not to. She chose her boyfriend, she chose her husband over her children, etc. So it's a really complicated issue.
Like, just to give you an example, like I have an aunt who her second husband was molesting my cousin, her a child from her first marriage. And when my cousin made an accusation against him, my aunt sided with her husband. And, you know, in the family, it's like, oh, well, she couldn't have left. You know, she was financially reliant on him. You know, she had to do what she did what she thought to protect her family and stuff. No. She sided with her child molester husband, and CPS came in, took all the kids, not just my cousin, but all the other kids as well, because they said, like, well, as long as there's a child molester here, the kids can't live here, right? So all the kids go to foster care. And then my cousin ends up recanting because foster care was so difficult for all of them. And she felt like she was responsible and feeling like, and all of my cousins, by the way, who went into foster care were abused, or some of them even sexually abused. And so she ended up recanting, and now she has a reputation for like, oh, she makes false accusations, yada, 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 when the whole reason why she recanted, even though it did actually happen, the whole reason why she recanted was to protect her own siblings, right? And so this, like my aunt, for example, is someone who's very controversial in our family. Like some people, I really get angry with people who feel a lot of sympathy for her, like, oh, she was abused too, and so on. It's like, no, she made a conscious choice to side with her husband over her own children. And she was like just a diehard, like, you know, stood by him in court, like saying like that her own child was lying about being molested and stuff. This is an example of a woman who's like, to me, like so willing to throw. Yeah, she might be indoctrinated. Yeah, she might have been socialized a certain way, but like there are a lot of women who are abused who don't make those kinds of choices, right? And I think it's insulting to say that, oh, women, you know, terrorize other women because they were abused. Just the same way I think it's unfair to say that men terrorize women because they were molested as kids or whatever. Those decisions are like a conscious choice, right? And so women like that, and, you know, with FDS, a lot of women who follow FDS, I've noticed, do have a difficult relationship with their mothers. I have a difficult relationship with my mother for a lot of these same reasons. And so we've been accused of, like, I guess, victim blaming because we hold these kinds of women responsible for their choices.
And like Lilith just illustrated, it's just multiple layers of betrayal, right? There's the victim blaming going on from the family, and then there's the victimization going on in the foster care system, or the victimization and the betrayal you feel of having your mother figure not defend you. So it's been a really, really tough process for us to even like navigate this very sensitive thing, because there are times where, yes, there's some women that like they just truly don't know any better, and then I think pop media has always painted these women as victims, or like totally victims. But those of us who've also experienced it or have seen them make choices, you know, against the interest of people around them that actually had cascading negative effects, if not traumatic, extremely traumatic effects. So it's like, how do we be honest to our experience, hold women accountable for choices that, especially when it comes to their children, can lead to intense amount of trauma, and at the same time push back at a system that created it, right? Like the patriarchy. So it's sticky to navigate this discussion, and I don't even know that we get it right all the time.
I think that it's complex, and the reason that it feels really complex is often because women have been typecast as like one-dimensional. So when they start contradicting shit, like in who they are as a person, everybody's like, what the fuck's going on?
You can be more than one thing?
Yeah.
You can be a complex, multifaceted human being? What?
Yeah, exactly. So even the theories around it are one-dimensional, and the discussions are one-dimensional, and the literature's one-dimensional. And then so when you try to reconcile all those complex nuances and identities, even like, you know, as you're having these conversations often, and I'm having these conversations often, you still end up pausing and being like,
Because we always say too, because we have a lot of people that have been truly, truly victimized by some truly awful circumstances. I feel like just like the willingness to seek out help is just far and above what we see from some other women who we feel like they're sort of content to maintain the status quo.
As long as they're relatively comfortable compared to other women.
Yeah, as long as they're relatively comfortable. So for us, it's like we've seen women go through horrible circumstances and then take it upon themselves to either break the cycle, not repeat the cycle by any means necessary, or at least understand that you can be both a victim and responsible, right? It's not necessarily black and white. You can be a victim and a person who perpetrates abuse, or at least like exacerbates and upholds a system of abuse. So we've sort of reconciled it with the idea that you can do both, and that, you know, your responsibility is to do your best, and your responsibility is to seek out strategies to better things. And that if you don't do that, then you're sort of tacitly accepting the way things are.
I think it depends. There's some of this, I don't know, there's some of what you say It would depend on the individual circumstance, because the way that you've just described that, I can think of cases where women have been definitely seen like that, and then when you scratch the surface, they're actually absolutely terrified for their lives. So they'll stay there forever because they know that if they leave, he will never leave them. Like he will destroy them, and he will take great pleasure in it for the next 2 months or 20 years. But like, I also, as I said, and I stand by it, that I know that there are women, and I've met women like it, and I'm still like, some of the things that even have happened to me in my life have been women who have done that and made choices to do so. And you could technically argue that they're all victims of oppression and patriarchy, and then therefore you could then sort of fall down a rabbit hole of saying, well, then they're not responsible for anything they say or do, or, you know, because they're victims first and foremost. But I think it's all context driven. I think it's all based on individual examples and individual, I guess, details of each situation. But I think in the majority of cases, if we were talking about women who can't or don't leave abuse, I mean, I've worked with thousands of women in the last 12 years, and in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't matter what resources you think that woman has, whether that's psychological resources, financial resources, or whatever. Even if they look comfortable and privileged, they are either so downtrodden by the abuse that they have absolutely no strength to do it. Like, it's too much, so they stay there. Or sometimes it's that they know that that perpetrator is going to fucking kill them, or is going to make their life hell, or knows stuff about them that no one else knows, and will go and tell their family or tell their workplace, or will destroy their lives or their reputation or their business or whatever. So they stay. And then in other cases, they stay out of guilt. In some cases, they stay out of shame or cultural norms. Or in some cases, they stay for religious reasons. Like, they believe that if they leave their marriage or their relationship, they'll live in sin. There's just so many ways you can keep a woman in those situations, to the point where they actually become indoctrinated and they accept these things to be real about themselves and about other women. The other thing that happens, I think, is that there's a level of psychological safety you can afford to yourself by convincing yourself that you are actually not being abused and you're fine, and that it's other women with the problem, and you don't need to get out, and that, you know, the women around you are jealous, or they're causing problems for you, or they're lying about your spouse or whatever it is, because it's a defense mechanism for you psychologically to convince yourself that it's everybody else with the problem, and that your relationship is absolutely fine, and that, you know, you're not really being abused, you're in total control. Because I mean, I've worked with teenage girls that were being trafficked and bought and sold and raped and were being threatened with their lives all the time, and you sit them down and say, you know, we need to help you get out. We're going to help you escape. And they're like, escape what? Like, I'm in total control here. And you're sort of like, how are you in control? And they're like, because, you know, I can do whatever I want and he'll pay me. And we're like, no, you're being trafficked. Like, and they're like, no, I'm in control, because if I go and give him a blowjob now, he'll give me, you know, 50 quid. And we're like, well, that's because he's a perpetrator and he's a grown-ass man and he knows he can exploit and control you. And they're like, no, I'm exploiting and controlling him. And like, that purely is psychological defense mechanism, right?
Yeah, I've seen, if you've ever seen the YouTube channel Soft White Underbelly, occasionally they interview pimps, and part of what the pimps do is convince these girls that they're in control.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually so insidious, the way that they spin a narrative to make the prostitution seem like it's like a power position.
Yeah.
All while they're being exploited by both the Johns and the pimp himself.
Yeah.
So that in itself is like multi-layered narratives that are full of bullshit that they've respun into female empowerment. So it's interesting to see. This is a side note, but it's interesting to see that
on sex work Twitter, they say the same thing. Like,
yeah, on sex work Twitter and liberal feminist media that just sort of wholeheartedly accepts this as reality. And I'm like, you don't even understand the various levels of power that you don't have. Because if you understood it, you wouldn't call this power, right? Because you're at best a worker, and like the thing about being any type of wage worker is that you're at the mercy of market demands. And something like sex trafficking, sex work, etc., market demands are often depraved and violent.
I don't know. I just have very little patience for lying. And so when I see women go online and talk about like, oh, I'm actually in the power position, or, sex workers are in the power position. They're actually exploiting the men, even if they're saying it as a psychological defense mechanism. I see that, and I just get so pissed off by dishonesty.
But they don't think they're being dishonest, because they genuinely believe that shit. Like they're not attempting to convince anybody or anything like that. They genuinely believe that. It's the way that they are able to function, especially when you've been in prostitution. That is like when I was in prostitution, that's exactly what I thought was like, that it was me with all the power, and that it was brilliant, and that I could do whatever I wanted, and the men were just like, that men are just stupid, and you just make them do what you want, like, for money, basically. But that was very short-lived for me, like literally, like incredibly short-lived, because I realized how much danger I was actually in, and that could turn on me at any moment, and I would be fucked, like I would be dead. And once that had got in my head, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and then I didn't ever do it again. And it was like, I was very lucky, because my life path could have been very different if I didn't get out really early, which is what I did. It's enough for me, even the memories of it is enough for me to know that in every situation I was in, I had absolutely no power whatsoever, but I definitely convinced myself that I did. Like, absolutely I did. I thought I did. I would, if you would have asked me when I was 18, I would have told you that I'm in total power and this is brilliant, and who the fuck are you to tell me what to do?
Yeah, that's tough. Another example of like both perpetrator and victim this is a conversation that happens a lot in the subreddit, where women from certain cultures, where it's normal to, when you get married, for the wife to join the husband's family. And so we read a lot of horror stories on the subreddit about women talking about how their mother-in-laws bully them and treat them like scullery maids and treat them like shit and emotionally terrorize them, even sometimes physically, like abusing them and so on.
Yeah.
And it's really, really difficult, because these mother-in-laws, they think that's normal, and they think that that's what I went through when she got married and so on, right? And she thinks that that's just like the circle of life. You get married, you get treated like shit by your mother-in-law. If you have a son, great, you're golden. And then you get a daughter-in-law that you then get to abuse, right? And so it's that sort of thing where, again, I have very little patience for, I'm just an impatient person in general. That's just kind of how I be. But I don't know. I read these kinds of stories and I just get so angry at the mothers-in-laws. It's like, how, because I've been abused and I've been treated like shit by women as well. And I learned that, like, oh, being abused feels shitty, and like I don't want to make other people feel shitty.
Yeah, put it on someone else, right?
So I wouldn't want to make someone else feel as badly as I was treated, right? And if I've been through suffering, right? So I just can't wrap my mind around going through abuse and then actually wanting to do that to other people. I don't understand it.
No, I know, but like, if you're not that kind of person, you just won't understand it. Like, I don't either, and I could never imagine doing like, if I think about all the things I've been through and all the things that I've felt, you'll notice, for example, that and I've had to have these conversations with like my wife and like with my family members and stuff. I'm so anti-aggression and anti-violence that I don't even have shouting in my house. Like, I can't even like there's just, and it doesn't matter as well. Like, people think that I'm quite confrontational and quite feisty, and I'm not. I'm actually really slow to temper. I have a very, very laid back temperament, and partially that's because I take a breath and I have a think, and I don't want to inflict any kind of aggression or violence that I've lived through on another human being. I don't want to do it, so I choose not to. It's a conscious decision, and that comes back to what you're saying about, like, the for example, with this mother-in-law, right? Yes, she's been subjected to it. Yes, she might think it's normal, but there is still a conscious decision there to act it out over again in a cycle. There is, I'm sorry, there is, like, because there are so many women who have been subjected to these types of violence and abuse that then couldn't think of anything worse than actually inflicting it on somebody else, and they never do it because it would trigger them so bad. It would upset them, it would scare them, it would traumatize them to inflict it on somebody else. So as far as I'm concerned, in cases like that, it's not as simple as like normalization and desensitization to it. It's actually that it's a way of lashing out. I'm sure it's it's like a way of taking it out on another woman. So you're no longer at the bottom of the pile. There's another woman under you that you can inflict it on. Do you know what I mean? And because of patriarchy and misogyny,
it's seen as an upgrade. Like, you go from being abused to abuser. That's seen as like you're moving up in life.
Yeah, for sure. And like I see that even in professional practice. You know, you get women in that become in positions of power in social care, police forces, and you know, psychology, therapy, and you give them a bit of power, and you know, there's, at the end of the day, there's different kinds of people. If you give some kinds of people power, they'll fucking harm people with it, and other people are very, very careful with levels of power. And the same goes for women, which is what we were saying earlier, is that it would be misogynistic to suggest that women are always safe with power. They're not. Why would they be, unless you believe the gender role stereotype, which is that all women are safe, all women are nurturing, all women are selfless and caring and lovely, which is bollocks. But you know, so the same thing will happen, is that if a woman's been abused and then you give her some power, there's going to be some women that would never ever use that negatively, and then there's going to be some that will fucking take it out on everybody. That you give them some power, they're going to harm people with it.
Yeah. I heard this quote, I can't remember who said it, but it was a really good quote. Power reveals. Power doesn't corrupt. Power reveals. And reveals what you would have done all along if you had that power.
I really like that.
I'll try to find who said that. But yeah, I've always had a problem with this idea that like power corrupts, and that like the more power you get, the more inherently evil you're going to, or that it's like, you know, you're destined to become evil. I feel like I'm going to take the Spider-Man quote, which is, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, not all people with power do evil things. Like, some people do choose to use their power in like a more beneficial way. Like you, for example. I'm really glad that as you've, you know, moved up and so on, that you've remained firm in your dedication to being victim focused like that.
I love hearing about your background, because there's so many women that, you know, come to us and are on our Patreon and converse with us. You know, they're starting from very little, or starting from nothing. And they have this idea that, oh, because I come from humble beginnings, or because of things that happened to me.
Because they're working class, or because these are
working class. Right, exactly. And so there's so many women that have let, you know, society shame them from going out and trying things because they feel that they are not deserving. So having anybody on our platform who can show, you know, a journey from being powerless to powerful is just inspiring beyond words.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to it.
If I ever have a daughter, I'm going to tell your story like instead of talking about like Brothers Grimm, or, you know, telling her fairy tales, I'm going to be like, and then there was a girl named Jess Taylor who she was born in a council estate, and then she vanquished her enemies. Because it is sort of like, you know, this really amazing story. Like, it is an inspirational story that I would want my daughter, if I have a daughter, to learn from that.
That's amazing.
So let's talk about your next book, Sexy But Psycho. How the patriarchy uses women's trauma against them.
This might actually be the most important thing that I'll ever write. So what I need you to do now is go and pre-order this book. And that's my plea to you. Go and pre-order it, because I need it to get into the bestsellers list in a couple of weeks' time. So we only have until the 10th of March to pre-order it. And if it gets into the bestsellers list, there are a lot of people that can't ignore this book, and then I can make even more noise about it. So if you could please go and pre-order it, that would be amazing. I'm trying to get about 800 more pre-orders by the 10th of March, and that will guarantee it being in the bestsellers list, and then I can make loads of noise about it. So that would be amazing if you could go and do that.
Yeah, ladies, I highly encourage you, listeners. We'll put the pre-order link in the show notes below. Please definitely pre-order this. It's important to support other women's work, especially work that's as important and disruptive to patriarchy as this.
Please check out patreon.com/the female dating strategy, because we will have part 2 of this interview up on Friday, and we will discuss in more detail Jess's book, Sexy But Psycho. Really, really do a deep dive into how the medical industry is pathologizing women's behavior and the disruptive work she's doing to change all that.
I've watched women's mental health records and their childhood traumas be used against them in the same trial where a man has used it to get off on the charge of attacking that woman. And you're like, how can that possibly be? Because that judge has just sat there and watched somebody go, oh, you know, she's got childhood trauma and she's mentally ill, and that's why we shouldn't listen to her because she's a fucking liar. And then the man has stood up and been like, I didn't do it, and I've got childhood trauma and my mental health is really bad. And the judge has gone, oh, that's terrible. terrible mate. No, apparently that means he's telling the truth.
So please check that out. You can also follow us on Twitter at femdatstrat and on our Instagram page at _the female dating strategy. Thanks for listening, queens. And for all you scrotes out there, you're full of the devil. Die mad. Hey ladies, are you looking for a podcast that brazenly advances women's political interests? Check out Female Political Strategy.
Female Political Strategy is a politics-focused spinoff brought to you by the ruthless minds behind the female dating strategy. I'm Lilith, a socialist.
Elle, a conservative.
And I'm Ro, and I'm politically non-binary.
Join us as we shatter male-crafted narratives on all sides of the political spectrum and spearhead our agenda for a female-focused future.
Tune in to Female Political Strategy wherever podcasts are distributed.
You can also find us on Twitter at Female Political. Until next time, Team Female.